I still remember the look on my father's face when the lawyer said my name. Not because he was proud, not because he was happy, but because, for the first time in my life, he looked completely shocked. And trust me, getting that reaction from him was almost impossible. For as long as I could remember, my parents had one favorite hobby, reminding me that I was a disappointment. My older brother, Daniel, was the golden child. Straight A student, captain of the football team, graduated with honors, worked for a major company before he turned 25. According to my parents, Daniel could do no wrong. Then there was me. I wasn't a bad kid. I never got into trouble. I worked hard. I paid my bills. But I wasn't impressive enough, at least not in their eyes. Every family gathering felt like a performance review. Why can't you be more like Daniel? Your brother owns a house already. Your brother got promoted again. Your brother is successful. It never stopped. At first, I argued. Then I defended myself. Eventually, I just stayed quiet. Because no matter what I achieved, it was never enough. When I started a small software business from my apartment, my father laughed. A real laugh. The kind that burns into your memory. People like you don't build companies, he said. You'll be back looking for a real job in 6 months. My mother agreed. Daniel smirked. I pretended it didn't hurt. But it did. It hurt more than I ever admitted. Over the next few years, I worked nonstop. 18-hour days, weekends, holidays, while everyone else celebrated birthdays and vacations. I sat behind a computer trying to keep my business alive. My family never asked how it was going. They only asked when it would fail. Then something unexpected happened. The company started growing, slowly at first, then faster. I hired employees, signed contracts, expanded operations, but I kept everything private because I already knew what would happen if I told my parents. They wouldn't support me. They would find a reason to tear it down. So I stayed silent, and then Grandpa got sick. That changed everything. Unlike the rest of the family, Grandpa always believed in me. Whenever everyone else mocked my dreams, he listened. Whenever I doubted myself, he encouraged me. One day they'll see what I see, he used to tell me. I wish he had been wrong. A few months later, he passed away. The funeral was heartbreaking. But what happened afterward was even worse, because that's when my family started fighting over the inheritance, and somehow, I became their favorite target. But that wasn't even the worst part. 3 weeks later, we were all called to the lawyer's office. And nobody knew what Grandpa's final will actually said. Not even Daniel, not even my parents. What happened next would change our family forever. The morning of the meeting felt strange. I arrived at the lawyer's office 10 minutes early. The waiting room was quiet, but the tension was impossible to ignore. My parents were already there. So was Daniel. The moment I walked in, my mother rolled her eyes. Look who finally showed up. I checked my watch. I was early, but correcting her wouldn't matter. It never did. Daniel leaned back in his chair and smiled. You know, this whole thing could have been done faster if Grandpa had just left everything to Mom and Dad. My father nodded. That's probably what happened. Then he looked directly at me. Don't get your hopes up. The words hit exactly the way he intended them to. Like always, I sat down without responding. Inside, I was exhausted. Not angry, not surprised, just tired. Even after Grandpa's death, they still found ways to put me down. A few minutes later, the lawyer entered the room carrying several folders. Everyone immediately sat up straighter. The atmosphere changed. This wasn't just a family meeting anymore. This was about money, and everyone knew it. The lawyer greeted us politely before opening a file. Before we discuss the estate, I need to explain something. Nobody interrupted. For once. Your grandfather updated his will several times over the last few years. That caught everyone's attention, especially my father's. What do you mean, updated? He asked. The lawyer adjusted his glasses. I mean, he made deliberate changes after reviewing certain events within the family. A strange silence filled the room. Then Daniel laughed. Grandpa always liked being dramatic. The lawyer didn't laugh. In fact, his expression became serious. Very serious, and that's when I knew something unusual was coming. What he said next stunned everyone. Your grandfather left detailed letters explaining his decisions. My mother frowned. Letters? Yes. The lawyer tapped the folder. He wanted every beneficiary to understand why they received what they received. The room suddenly felt smaller. Nobody spoke. Then the lawyer began reading. The first section covered small gifts to extended relatives. Family, friends, charities, nothing unusual. My parents relaxed. Daniel looked confident. They clearly believed the main inheritance would go exactly where they expected. Then another letter appeared, and everything changed. The lawyer cleared his throat. This letter concerns Daniel. My brother immediately smiled. Of course he did. For years he had been treated like the future king of the family. He probably expected a fortune. The lawyer started reading. Daniel, I love you, but love does not require me to ignore the truth. Daniel's smile disappeared. The room became silent. Over the years, I watched you measure people by their income, status, and usefulness. I watched you mock your brother for taking risks. I watched you enjoy praise while contributing very little to those around you. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. My parents exchanged nervous looks. But the letter wasn't finished. Character matters more than appearances. Unfortunately, you never understood that. For the first time in my life, I saw Daniel speechless. Then came the number, his inheritance. It was much smaller than anyone expected. Much smaller. Daniel's face turned pale. My mother immediately objected. There has to be some mistake. The lawyer calmly shook his head. There is no mistake. The room grew tense. But that wasn't even the biggest shock. Not even close, because the next letter was addressed to my parents, and judging by the lawyer's expression, it wasn't going to be pleasant. My father sat straighter, confident, certain. After all, they were Grandpa's children. Surely they would inherit most of the estate, right? The lawyer began reading, and within seconds my father's confidence started disappearing. To my son and daughter-in-law. The lawyer paused, then continued. I spent years watching how you treated your youngest child. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. I felt my heart pounding, because suddenly I knew exactly where this was heading, and so did my parents. The lawyer kept reading. You praised one son while constantly belittling the other. My mother's eyes widened. You mistook criticism for guidance. My father's jaw tightened. You called him a failure before his journey had even begun. The room became painfully quiet. The lawyer continued. And for that reason, I cannot trust you with the responsibility of my legacy. My mother looked horrified. My father looked furious, but the worst part was still coming. Because the lawyer hadn't even reached the final section of the will, the section with my name on it. And judging by everyone's expressions, nobody was prepared for what was about to happen. The lawyer turned the page slowly. It felt intentional, like he knew everyone in the room was holding their breath, especially me. My palms were sweating, not because I expected something big, but because I didn't expect anything at all. For years, I had been the failure of the family, so I assumed Grandpa's death wouldn't change that. I was wrong. The lawyer finally spoke. This section of the will is titled, For the One They Misunderstood. My mother let out a sharp breath. My father frowned immediately. What kind of wording is that? The lawyer didn't answer. He just started reading. To my grandson. My heart dropped slightly. So it was me. I watched you build something from nothing. The room went still. I watched you work when others doubted you. Daniel shifted in his chair again. My father scoffed quietly, but the lawyer continued. I also watched your family discourage you at every step. Silence, heavy silence. You were called a failure before you had the chance to succeed. My throat tightened, because it was true. Every word. The lawyer turned another page. But I never believed them. That sentence hit harder than anything before it. My mother looked at me quickly. For the first time. She didn't look angry. She looked unsure. The lawyer continued. I kept track of your work over the years, not because I doubted you, but because I wanted proof of what I already knew. My father interrupted sharply. What proof? The lawyer looked up, then answered calmly. Your grandson built a technology system that several companies now depend on. Daniel laughed nervously. That's impossible. But the lawyer didn't stop. In fact, one of my own companies relies on his software infrastructure. The room froze. My head slowly lifted. I didn't know Grandpa knew that. I never told him. The lawyer continued reading. And because of that, I made a decision. He paused again. Longer this time, the kind of pause that feels like a warning. Then he said it. Everything I own is transferred into a trust, and the controlling rights belong to my grandson. My mother stood up instantly. That's not possible! My father slammed the table. You're saying he gets everything? Daniel's face turned red. Everything over what? A startup? The lawyer remained calm. It is not a startup. He adjusted the paper slightly. It is a fully operating technology network valued in the multi-millions. The room exploded. My mother was shaking her head. My father looked like he couldn't process it, and Daniel just stared at me. For the first time ever, he had nothing to say. But the lawyer wasn't finished. There is also a final condition. Everyone turned back immediately. What condition? My father demanded. The lawyer looked directly at me. then said something that changed everything again. The trust becomes fully active only if the beneficiary chooses to continue the family business legacy without interference from those who undermined him. My stomach tightened, because I understood exactly what that meant: control, independence, and protection from my own family. My mother whispered, "This is insane." But I wasn't listening to her anymore, because suddenly I realized something even bigger. Grandpa hadn't just left me money. He had left me a choice and a shield. The lawyer closed the folder. That concludes the reading of the will. But nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The room was frozen in shock, except me, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't the failure in the room anymore. The silence didn't last long. My father was the first to break it. "This is manipulation," he said sharply. "You can't just erase a family like this." The lawyer didn't react. He had probably heard this reaction many times before. But Daniel wasn't looking at the lawyer anymore. He was looking at me, like he was trying to figure out when exactly I had become this version of myself, the version Grandpa believed in. "You hid this from us?" Daniel asked. His voice wasn't angry yet. It was confused, almost betrayed. I finally spoke. "I didn't hide anything. You never asked." That hit harder than I expected. My mother immediately stepped in. "This is ridiculous. Your grandfather was clearly influenced. He must have misunderstood what was really going on." The lawyer calmly opened another document. "There is evidence supporting his decisions." He placed it on the table. Screenshots, reports, performance, summaries, contracts, my work, my company's growth, everything. My father leaned forward, scanning the pages. His expression slowly changed. Not into acceptance, but disbelief. This can't be real," he muttered, but it was, and deep down he knew it. Daniel stood up suddenly. "So what now?" he said loudly. "We just accept that he gets everything?" The lawyer answered without hesitation. "Yes." That single word broke something in the room. My mother's voice cracked. "But he's still our son." The lawyer looked at her. "So was your treatment of him fair?" No one answered that, because there was no answer that didn't sound ugly. The tension turned heavier. Then my father pointed at me. "This is your fault." That surprised even Daniel. My father continued. "You turned him against us. You filled his head with ideas. This is revenge." I shook my head slowly, but I didn't raise my voice. "I didn't do anything to you," I said. "You did it to yourself." That silence afterward was different. Not tense, not emotional, just cold, like something had finally snapped into place. Then the lawyer added one final detail. "One more thing," he said. Everyone turned again. "There is a clause regarding interference." My father frowned. "What clause?" The lawyer looked at me briefly, then back at them. "If any family member attempts to pressure, sabotage, or discredit the beneficiary's work or business, they will be legally removed from all access to the estate." Daniel laughed nervously. "You're threatening us now?" The lawyer didn't blink. "It is not a threat. It is a condition." The room went quiet again. This time nobody argued, because they finally understood something. This wasn't just inheritance. It was protection from years of dismissal, from manipulation, from control. My father slowly sat back down. For the first time, he looked uncertain. Not angry, not loud, just uncertain. And that alone felt like a victory I never expected. The lawyer gathered his papers. But before he left the room, he looked at me one last time. "He believed in you long before any of this," he said quietly. Then he walked out, leaving the entire family in silence, and me, sitting in the center of it. No longer the ignored son, no longer the failure, just the one person they had never taken seriously. Until it was too late. Nobody spoke for almost a full minute after the lawyer left. It felt like the air itself had changed. Heavier, stranger, like the room no longer belonged to my family, but to the truth they had avoided for years. My mother finally broke the silence. "This can still be fixed," she said quickly, turning toward me. "We can talk about this at home. We are family." That word, family, sounded different now, like it meant something she only remembered when she needed it. Daniel laughed once, but there was no humor in it. "So now you matter?" he said quietly, looking at me. "After all this time?" I didn't answer immediately, because for years I had waited for that question, waited for them to notice me, waited for them to care. But now that they finally did, it didn't feel the way I imagined. It felt too late. My father stood up slowly. His voice was lower now, controlled. "This isn't over," he said. "You think you can just walk away with everything Grandpa left?" I looked at him. Really looked at him. For the first time without fear. I didn't take anything, I said. He gave it. That silence again, the kind that doesn't need volume to feel loud. My mother stepped closer. Her voice softened. Please, she said. We made mistakes, but we can fix this. We're your parents. That word hit differently now. Parents. Because real parents don't need a will to recognize their child's worth. I took a slow breath. I spent years trying to earn your respect, I said. Years listening to how I wasn't enough. My voice didn't shake. Not anymore. But Grandpa saw me without needing proof. Daniel looked down at the table. For the first time, he didn't look angry. He looked empty. Like everything he believed about our family had cracked in one afternoon. My father tried one last time. This will ruin everything, he said. The family, the name, the legacy. I nodded slightly. No, I replied. It just exposed it. That was the moment everything shifted for me. Not the inheritance, not the money, but the realization that I no longer needed their approval to exist. My mother wiped her eyes, but I didn't move toward her. Not out of hatred, but clarity. Some apologies don't rebuild what was broken for years. Sometimes they just confirm it happened. I stood up, slowly. And for the first time, nobody tried to stop me. I'm not here to destroy this family, I said quietly. I never was. I paused. But I'm also not going back to being invisible. Daniel finally spoke. Where does that leave us? I looked at him. At my parents, at everything that used to define my life. And I answered honestly. Where you should have started treating me like a human being. Silence. Final. Complete. I walked out of the lawyer's office without looking back. Outside. The air felt different. Lighter. Not because my life had become perfect, but because something heavier had finally been lifted. Years later, I would understand something Grandpa once tried to teach me. Respect isn't given after success. It's supposed to come before it. And when it doesn't, people eventually learn the truth in the hardest way possible. Not through words, but through consequences. And as I stepped forward into a life I built myself, I finally stopped waiting for my family to believe in me. Because I already did.